Hello and welcome back to the ReGen podcast. I'm ReGen and I'm here with Rob Sadler from Hairpin Motorsport Media. What do I call you? What is your job title there? You can be anything you want to be, like media director or content manager.
Content producer extraordinaire.
Content producer extraordinaire. We'll go with that. Yeah, that works.
Thank you very much for having me on.
You're welcome. You're very much welcome. And this is the point where normally I would go and say, check out Hairpin Motorsport Media and their content, but I suppose with lockdown and everything, and this is a good way to segue into our first topic here, you haven't really been able to do a lot in the way of content creation recently.
No, I think the last time we uploaded to our YouTube channel was back in March.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
It's been tough, kind of from our point of view, because unlike yourself, our content comes from events that are running. So predominantly we kind of cover local rallying, and the last time one of those ran in front of spectators was back in March, which we're now into December, and we never thought it would.
Yeah, that's true. We've had racing, but racing you can actually go and spectate, as that's
it's been challenging. Ground. Yeah, so it's been tough, and kind of the same with photography. There have been opportunities with that, which I think we'll kind of come to later on. I would imagine, but kind of keeping content when we basically will go to an event, take our video equipment, film it, and then edit it and upload it that day, because it's the heat of the moment. You kind of need to get it online. So it's been quite difficult, but you look through you do some archive stuff and stuff that content that hasn't seen the light of day before. Like, for example, some content we got from an M Sport test, Alfyn Evans, who doing rather well since then. Well, we never got a chance to upload that because of just the nature of it, but we were able to get that out. But I know a lot of other outlets have been kind of going back into the archives and doing that, because that seems to be the best way we can kind of keep the social media accounts alive. Well,
that's true. And as far as being in our position, being a content creator, the degree to which lockdown has affected you, I think, is quite dependent on the kind of content that you're doing and what you're putting out. Yeah. And there's a lot of people who've had to kind of adapt their content, because if you're someone like the sort of content that I do primarily, or you're like the F1 word, or Josh Revel, or any of those kinds of people, a lot of your video is you just like talking about things.
Yeah, exactly.
Which you can do anywhere. You can do that in a lockdown. Yeah. But then I've seen other people like Super GT. His content a lot of it is centered around videos of him karting with commentary, and obviously karting hasn't really been a thing for much of lockdown. So he's adapted a lot of his content, if I remember, towards more sort of online gaming communities. We'll get onto that more later as well.
Yeah, it's certainly with like the likes of yourself, and kind of the period between around mid-ish March until when kind of motorsport in general was able to resume, which must have been mid-June. There was quite a big period where there was nothing new happening in the motorsport world. But like you said, like for example, we both watch Josh Revel's videos. They're fantastic, and in that period you're kind of seeing like videos like what happened with a team in the past, and kind of going back into the history of the sport.
Exactly. And it helps if your content is sort of geared towards doing that sort of thing anyway. Because he already did a lot of videos like that. But that's another way that I hadn't necessarily thought about, I suppose, that it affects it. I mean, apart from the practical implications of, you can't go out, you can't go to motorsport events as well. There's the fact that for a while we didn't even have any motorsports running, so there wasn't any sort of viral topics to go out and report on either. So you had to sort of go, oh, let's go back and do a video about Pastor Maldonado or something. Remember how funny he was, instead of, say, doing the video about how terrible Alex Albon is supposedly doing this week.
Well, no, there's going to be a fair few of those, I think.
Yeah. See, there is now that F1's back and running again.
Yeah, no, exactly, and of course for yourself, you had the huge bulk of the Berlin 6 races to cover for Formula E.
Well, that was true, and it's unusual, of course, with Formula E. We're going to no doubt go on to that as a topic later on as well, but it was unusual to have it all condensed and packed together, so basically into the space of a week. So it really kept me on my toes and meant that I had to sort of get my head down and try, and it was hard to keep up that week, like getting content about, because I mean, ideally I'd like to do some kind of topic reaction type video or a podcast on every race, and normally that's what I'd try to do, but when you've got them all crammed into the space of a week, that just wasn't really possible. So that's another way I've been affected by it.
Yeah, that's true, because that's kind of where your content kind of differs to the mainstream media like Autosport or the race, because that's journalism designed to be news bites daily, whereas yours is more insight and kind of detailed explanations into what's going on, and for example, how Daniel Abt it was dumped out of the system and has come back and has always kind of been there or thereabouts. And
well, that's true, and of course I do have a series of videos which is kind of looking back on historical events, primarily in Formula E, but also in motorsport. But I find sometimes with those videos it's hard to really get an audience on them, because unless there's a reason why that topic has particularly gone viral or exploded recently, no one's necessarily going to be searching for, say, what X driver was doing back in season 2 or something.
Well, I think you might have a couple of topics to be able to speak about after this week, but I assume we'll come to that.
Yes. Well, there's been quite a lot of developments in Formula E just recently, but of course one of them was on Jerome D'Ambrosio's retirement. So I've already sort of got a video in. I've already got a video in development on that
excellent.
one. Sort of a historical video looking back on Jerome D'Ambrosio's career. So, but again, with the lockdown and the way things have been condensed together, we had that crazy week in Berlin, and then it's all quiet again. And then I had to look the calendar up again to remind myself earlier, but I don't. The confirmed races, the first race of the next Formula E season, season 7, isn't till in January now. So we've had this sort of long patch, apart from all the recent news with all the car launches and the team news and everything. But this long period of not very much happening.
Yeah, it's strange, and where we're coming to that natural kind of break again for the likes of Formula One. We're well within it in the British touring cars now. That's gone quiet, and it will be for some time.
Everything is quite quiet at the moment.
World Rally Championship will be pretty much that because that restarts in January. That'll be okay, but the vast majority are coming to that natural pause again, which we had between from until June, really. And like you say, but then there are the content creators that you watch who do make what I think called IRL videos, the out and about vlogs or whatever.
That's true as well.
And I mean, for example, the channel I watch is Car Throttle. They're kind of based on kind of the 3 lads kind of messing around with kind of cheap cars in real life. And of course, that's all in person and all physical.
Yeah.
Their content, if you look back at it now, when they're all at home on video calls or whatever, just kind of doing like listicle style videos, it doesn't quite suit their market, particularly day in, day out. Which is kind
people
of where,
like that. They're in a particularly different position. They're kind of in the hardest position of all, really.
So I mean,
it's easy enough for someone like me to adapt. I mean, when I first launched the ReGen project, I did have this idea about going down to London and visiting Battersea Park in London, like with a selfie stick, to talk about the championship finale in Bohemia and Degrassi crashing into each other and all of that. And obviously, I can't do that now. That will have to wait until
Yeah,
next year. But
it's easy to forget that there was supposed to be a double header in London. I'd
that's
forgotten.
true as well. I mean, other than Battersea Park, of course, there was going to be the one in the XL Centre, which
Yeah,
I was going to go to originally.
yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah.
that there's another thing that has to wait until next year now.
Yeah, well, hopefully, and with there will be an element with these channels that it was difficult, and they've kind of kept the content coming, and now they'll be kind of be able to start looking to kind of get back into a normal flow. So, like for yourself, try and get these in real life videos out in London, for example, or maybe even look at going abroad. Who knows? But I know what you mean, and. Yeah, it's. I mean, everyone's been saying it's been difficult and it's been weird, and it's true.
It is. So, I mean, we've talked about how I wanted to do the video in London and stuff, but of course, I'm still in quite a lucky position because I still have content to keep putting out that kind of fits my audience. Unlike the position that people like Car Throttle or Super GT are in, as you mentioned. So yes, we've talked about, we did touch on there briefly the Berlin races, that manic week that we had in Berlin in Formula E. What are your opinions about the way that the Formula E situation, the finale, was handled under lockdown? Because it was always going to be a bit of a compromise, and we ended up with an unusual situation of 6 races basically at the same venue, packed together.
Yeah.
Do you think they could have done things any differently, or how well did that work, do you think?
Well, I think given the circumstances and the nature of, how the Formula E championship kind of works in the nature of the races, I think it was a huge success, in my opinion, because the Formula E, the aim is to kind of take I know it's going to sound like a marketing campaign, but it takes the races to where the people are. So it takes it into a city centre and goes, there is racing happening where you normally go about your...
And the city centres is a big part of the marketing as well, because it's about electric racing, it's about it being green, and cities are associated with pollution and all the noisy cars and traffic and everything, so it's saying we can have racing in the middle of a city and it be green. Yeah. So it's a big part of the selling point and the image.
Yeah.
And this was something I was thinking about earlier, how they could have gone and said, okay, we'll go out into the hills somewhere, we'll go to Portimao or something. That's just the first place I think off the top of my head. But instead they've gone to the middle of Berlin, which is, of course, a great... lucky in a way that the Tempelhof airfield provides an ideal venue where you can be in the middle of a city and also sort of be separated from the city at the same time, which was ideal for that purpose.
Which kind of comes to what I was kind of thinking, because as we've seen with pretty much all major motorsports, elite motorsports, which we'll kind of come to, the big theme has been non-spectator. And of course, at a place like Silverstone or a place like Spa, you just close the gates, stop people coming in, no problem. That is so much more difficult to do than in like the actual, say, for example, the centre of Paris.
Yes.
How do you block all of the side roads, how do you get people to stay away?
Yeah.
You cannot.
I mean, you just can't, really.
No, you can't, which is where Tempelhof is.
The Formula E, certainly, if they were going to do anything that would feel fitting and right for Formula E, really, and in line with their image, as we discussed, they were in a real difficult position compared to other motorsports. Yeah, Formula 1, they could go to Silverstone, whatever, but Formula E were in a quite unique and difficult position. And for quite a while, I was worried, because I was thinking, well, they might not be able to race in a city centre, or worse, they might have to just call the season off after 5 races, because how can you do the racing in city centres under lockdown? And I believe Mahindra, well, actually I've got the post here Mahindra made a post just a few days ago, which was for their Unsung Heroes Award, which is a thing they do on their social media. And they
Okay.
were promoting Margot McMillan, who's the Formula E event organizer, who apparently had a lot to do with organising that because she organised the whole COVID-19 lockdown protocol for that event. So yeah, shout out to her for her involvement in that, and great job to everyone who made the event possible. And very lucky that Berlin Tempelhof as a place to hold the event was available.
Yeah, and of course we've seen the Tempelhof Airport kind of used as a Formula E venue prior to
Oh yes,
2020, which kind of meant that it was able to be run behind closed doors naturally because of the nature of the venue. You could stop people being able to attend close up and kind of deterring the spectators from trying
yeah.
to attend, which I think was quite a big part of it. It also meant it still felt like a natural round of the Formula E Championship because we've seen it before.
Yeah, it didn't feel like, I mean, apart from the fact that there were 6 races and one of them was on a
Yeah,
reverse layout and all of that, but it was always going to be a bit of a compromise. And
yeah,
considering I thought we were going to be looking for quite a while at possibly not having any more races and the season called off, and that's the championship, and they're just non-championship races, and that was it. It was always going to be a compromise, and I think what we got, considering the circumstances, was probably the best we could have hoped for.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I think it was always going to be strange. It was always going to be different and difficult, but I think they did a brilliant job with it.
Yeah. So yes, you've got the more international, wider stage motorsports, the likes of Formula E and Formula One, and of course, I don't know about you, but I'm no expert on the current sort of COVID and lockdown restrictions in all the countries in Europe and worldwide. But what I am knowledgeable about, as we are British motorsport fans here, is the situation here in the UK, and we're under lockdown, or technically we've just come out of a
Yeah,
lockdown at the moment, and we're in a weird sort of tiered system. And of course, under that lockdown, I wanted to talk about it because this is a subject area that's nearer to us as British fans as the British Touring Car Championship, because that last lockdown put the British Touring Car Championship finale into jeopardy, and they went ahead with it at the end, and it was really exciting. Really enjoyed watching it. But what do you think about the way that was handled, and were they right to go ahead with it?
well, yeah, nobody really knew what exactly was going to happen when we went into the second lockdown about a month ago,
Yeah,
because we'd already emerged from a lockdown prior to this with no sport running. As we've mentioned, it was quiet for a while, and all the championships kind of had to get together their calendars, get together their COVID-19 protocols to kind of manage how they keep everybody safe, and then kind of started to get into the swing of things. And the British touring cars, they managed to get going over the summer. They had this, the usual rounds, and it all kind of felt a bit natural, minus
yeah,
spectators. But of course, as we saw with the elite sport versus non-elite sport, that I think football is probably going to be the best example
yeah,
to give with this, because football, the Premier League, they wanted to get going so quickly. That was like the absolute paramount to get that going again, for reasons that are quite hard to see, especially if you're not a football fan. Whereas,
Well, yes, I
I
mean, I'm sitting here, I don't really even know the situation with football, not being a football fan, so you definitely sort of have the floor
yeah.
on this one.
So they got the Premier League restarted. I cannot remember exactly when, but it was kind of not too long after the original lockdown, and it was the first kind of sporting event to get going again, and
Yeah,
it showed that sport could run through a lockdown and through tighter restrictions if they manage the situations themselves. So with the way that Formula One showed, that the masks and the testing could
yeah,
prevent, and the British touring cars, they did the same. They had masks, mandatory masks, and
Yeah.
non-spectators, and they'll have had severe, serious testing. That they showed that going into this second lockdown, that they were safe and capable
Yeah.
to keep going whilst they still had the equipment and the infrastructure in place to do so, as well as a calendared event which was quite important for the teams to get done. So, and also, during this lockdown, we still saw, for example, I think darts were still going. I think tennis might even have still been going. Football was certainly still going. So I can't see why motorsport, especially something like the British touring cars, the British GT continued. I think the superbikes were able to continue. And I think why not? If other sports can run, then, well, I think motorsport had every right to.
Well, it's about balancing it out, because there's a level of risk with everything, I think, really,
Yeah.
isn't there? And, I certainly don't want to play down the dangers of COVID and all that, but it's like I saw someone who I follow on Twitter, who I won't name, but like had a massive meltdown and a big rant recently about people traveling under lockdown, and and they compared it. They had this analogy about like firing a loaded gun into a crowd of people, and that's quite melodramatic. I mean, again, I take the COVID thing very seriously. I actually know a friend of mine who sort of works in a care home and has had to witness people dying from COVID. It is very serious stuff, but it's all about measuring up the risk. If you have the right precautions in place, then, which clearly motorsport have spent, the motorsport events have spent a lot of time organising this to balance the risk and to make sure things are going to be at least relatively safe, because crossing the road is dangerous. And I think they've been able to justify the risk.
Yeah, well, I mean, leaving your house is dangerous. It's all.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that kind of from a personal point of view, because when you go and do certain activities or whatever, especially with COVID-19, you're only put within reason. You're only putting yourself in as much risk as you let yourself.
Yeah.
Because for example, I was able to go to Alton Park a couple of times, and an event like that, some people would say, well, why are you allowed to go and watch that? That's dangerous. But you were able to stay away from people, and if somebody, if there was a situation where you could have been in close proximity to someone, you step back and step away from it and manage how you put yourself in the situation. And I think a lot of people are scared, and of course they are, and
understandably,
that totally makes sense. And I think certain people will have had closer calls with it than others, and personal experiences. But yeah, my opinion is, if you are so frightened of going out and catching it, then don't put yourself in the situations. I know it's hard to watch people blatantly breaking the rules, and we've all been frustrated by that. But when it comes down to it, what can you do?
And there's a difference between people blatantly breaking the rules. I can't say that word today, but that's one thing. But an organised motorsport event with all the masks and social distancing and precautions in place, where there is a system that's been put in place and has been organised very carefully to maintain things relatively safe, like that's a different thing.
Oh, definitely. And again, we saw in Formula One, the Racing Point drivers, they tested positive and they didn't turn up, and you didn't hear it kind of snowball effect. And it shows that the system works. They have it in.
Even Lewis Hamilton is not exempt from that.
Yeah, exactly. But people, they were able to plan accordingly and be able to have the protocols in place to deal with a positive test.
Indeed, this was all factored in the organisation and the planning beforehand, that during these tests someone might come up as positive, but they've planned for that and accommodated for it.
Absolutely, yeah. So it was always gonna be a controversial point, but again, we've got all sports have been continuing through this. Why not motorsport as well?
Yeah. So we've talked now about how the motorsport authorities and the racing events themselves have reacted to and dealt with the situation, and how the Formula E racers and the touring cars have gone ahead, how Formula One have managed things with drivers testing positive. What I want to do now for the last part of the discussion is turn things towards the fans, back towards us basically, and how we've responded to the dealing with lockdown. I mean, like, how has it been for you as a motorsport fan, like, not being able to go out and attend? Like, how have you been sort of coping with that, I suppose? And how have you found ways to appreciate and enjoy motorsport without being able to go out there and be a part of it?
Yeah, well, I think, nowadays, imagine if we had this pandemic, 40 years ago,
Yeah.
we wouldn't, the TV coverage and the online coverage we have of motorsport nowadays is so all-encompassing that you can't miss a single second of it on your TV.
That's true.
And, for example, you've got Formula One, of course, that's got full coverage on Sky Sports, and then you've got the World Rally Championship that's got its own streaming service, and GT series that's all live on YouTube. A weekend you would have British touring cars, World GT series, and F1 on the same weekend, and you wouldn't know what to do with yourself. You had so much to watch.
No, sometimes there's a little bit too much, isn't there?
Yeah, so
especially during that 1 week at Berlin with the Formula E.
Well, yeah, there'd be points where it'd be a Thursday night and you think, great, there's a race to watch. And
that's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. And I think kind of in that regard, we're extremely lucky that we have got all of the televised media to just bring the motorsport into our homes. But of course, we're all the same. There's watching it on the TV, which is great, but there is an element when you're watching it trackside, which is even better.
It is. It's certainly different anyway. I mean, it is great watching it, and I really appreciate how we're able to follow everything online and on the TV, and so much is broadcast. And certainly, like you say, that wasn't the case even like 40, 50 years ago. That was nothing like it is now. But there is definitely a difference and a different way of appreciating it when you're actually there. I remember my very first Formula One race. I attended like back in 2009, and one of my distinct memories was as we were sort of approaching the circuit, driving towards the circuit, and you could hear the sounds of the cars, like even from, because of course back then, people complain about the sound of F1 a lot now, but back then, it was the so-called glory days of the V8s, and screaming, wailing cars, which hurt your ears when you were actually there in the grandstands. But it certainly was powerful when you were outside the circuit and driving into the circuit. I think it was like the third practice that had just started at the time, because we were going to be there for qualifying. And you could hear the cars, and even the support series, the GP2 cars, going around as well.
Oh yeah.
And there's something there's something magical about that you can't quite recapture on the TV. But there's always next year for that.
There is, I mean, from my point of view, I think the one that is the hardest to explain, because it probably sounds a bit mad, is the buzz before a stage in the World Rally Championship. You've woken up at 4 a.m. or something stupid, and you've driven up a single track forest road and parked your car in a ditch. It's pouring down, and it's about 7 o'clock in the morning. The light is barely lifted. Then you hear way off in the distance the sound of a full-blown World Rally car absolutely screaming through the forest.
I mean, I've not yet been to a World Rally Championship event, but just from the way you're describing it there, like I'm feeling the buzz from that. Yeah, and to have gone to all that effort as well, like sort of waking up so early in the morning and everything. To be and to go to that effort, like shows that's the reason why you're doing it. That's what you're there for.
And of course, you see the car for about 10 seconds and then it's
and
gone.
then it's gone.
Yeah, but the noise of it approaching it, it's like the first one of the year, and you don't know how committed they're going to be through the right hander. And turns out it's like the world champion at the wheel, and they come off full opposite lock sideways. And just go, this is why I come. This is why I am here. And you forget how tired you are.
Yeah, so there's nothing quite like that. But yes, it's good how we've had the online content and things to watch as well. And when we mentioned before how much coverage there is of the races, and like that week when they were in Berlin and everything. But how did you find the period when there wasn't really any racing on, when there was the initial lockdown? Like, how were you able to sort of do anything to fulfill your motorsport appetite during that time? Because the good thing is there's a lot of online content, even when there's no motorsport going on. There is motorsport content and things to do. And,
there is, and of course, I think what we saw especially was the world kind of focus on sim racing.
Yes, I was about to bring that up. The sim racing community sort of really benefited from that, and of course you had the more casual fans who weren't that sort of familiar with sim racing sort of coming in and sort of suddenly, and I was one of those fans because I've been a motorsport fan for a long time, but I've not ever been that aware of how deep the sim racing community goes. So I think it was a kind of a novelty to everyone, sort of realizing just how serious the sim racing community is.
Yeah, so I mean, before lockdown, I kind of keeping my eye on sim racing and following it as much as possible.
Yeah.
I do a little bit myself, but it's more just kind of for fun more than taking it particularly
That's a good
seriously.
thing about sim racing as well. There's different levels of it.
Yeah,
if you want to compete to be the Lewis Hamilton of sim racing, you can do. There are leagues for that. Yeah. But if you don't really care about that and you just want to enjoy it and muck around a bit, you can do that as well.
Yeah. But it was the obvious step whilst you couldn't go out and do in real life motor racing, and there's the disciplines are all kind of covered in sim racing at the moment. For example, I think iRacing is probably the most detailed one available, and it is a simulation. Whether or not it's truly realistic is debatable.
Well, I find it I find it interesting that, of course, for the sort of proof that it is a different discipline, and there are subtle differences. You have the real life racing drivers coming in and doing the sim racing, and they're being beaten by the sim racing champions because of the skill set to be a sim racer and drive real life racing cars is slightly different. There are nuances to it.
But of course, you could kind of put this back to real life because, it's much like if you told a British touring car driver to jump into a Formula Ford car and then take on that year's Formula Ford champion. It takes time. It takes time to learn and adapt. The professional sim racers, that's what they do. They know the simulator. They know how to drive the car in the simulator.
Yeah.
Whereas the racing drivers, they've obviously got a natural ability to pick up whatever it is behind the wheel and drive it quickly. But of course, it's that last little few percent that the sim racers know in the game and feel through their steering wheel. I mean,
I think anyone who's a professional racing driver can certainly get in a sim racing car and drive it fast and probably beat your average person. But the real people who grind away on the sim racing, they have that little something extra you were talking about because they live and breathe sim racing. It's their life.
Exactly. And but I think with the sim racing that we saw, Formula One, I think again was kind of the big name to really throw a big media presence to it. They had they had a number of their drivers on and competing. The lads that everybody loved was Alex Albon, George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Nicholas Latifi. I'm missing some, but Lando Norris, that's the one. And they were all kind of omnipresent in these races, and you could kind of you're watching a race on your laptop, on your phone, or whatever, and it didn't quite look real, but the commentator is saying the names that you know. And even though
Exactly.
the cars, and I think the quote that YouTube sim racer Jimmy Broadbent says quite a lot, which is, the cars may not be real, but the racing certainly is. And I think we saw that especially during the lockdown, that, yeah, maybe the cars weren't real, but they're still racing, and the racing is still happening no matter what, based on user input. So the racing is always going to be real. And it certainly helped bridge the gap because, for example, the Le Mans 24 hours, they did the virtual 24 hours
Yeah.
was mega. The names they had in that list,
Yeah.
and they had a really professional kind of TV style broadcast with it. And if you shut your eyes and just listened to it, you would think it was real without any doubt.
That was it. And of course, I'm going to get in a shout out here for the Formula E series that they were doing as well, because although the physics of it at times looked questionable, let's say, it was all the drivers that we know and watch, and Jack Nicholls commenting on it, and all the drivers we used to seeing Van Dorn there, and everyone with the exception of Daniel Abt, but they were all there.
Nice, that's a good joke. But again, like, I assume I unfortunately didn't watch the Formula E.
Yeah. I didn't watch it intensely, but I tuned into it one or two times out of curiosity, and it was certainly fun seeing them all out there.
Yeah, and with Jack on the commentary and the names you recognise, you could close your eyes and it was real. And it was real life.
And they were the real drivers as well.
Exactly. So I think the sim racing was the big winner during lockdown, and I think it did show, like you mentioned, to an audience that may not have kind of looked for sim racing or ever kind of gotten into it or heard of it. I think it brought them up to date with where simulators have kind of gotten to.
Well, yes, I think it really woke a lot of people up to it. I mean, again, obviously I was aware of sim racing, but I wasn't really aware of just how, I mean, I should have suspected it really, with how technology has progressed and things, but I wasn't fully aware of just how deep it went and how much things had advanced and the level of competition in sim racing in the online community that exists at this point.
I think the biggest eye-openers from that regard, there's two. You've kind of got, I think, the Gran Turismo Sport World Series, when you realise, these people fly around the world to attend events in glamorous locations, and they have a really professional, multilingual media presence.
It's one of those worlds, and they exist with kind of niche things where, it's really big, it's really, really big and really serious, but only if you're in it. If you are an outsider, you're not aware of it. But once you get into it, then it's really, really big, and you're aware of how big and how serious it is, and the fact it's all around the world, as you said.
It's a huge, and of course then you have the Formula One esports series, and again, it's such a professional package that you can't help but take it seriously, because you're watching it such a tight run series,
and of course
digital,
and of course at that time, as far as live up to date racing went, that was all we had.
Yeah, and
so you certainly take what you take what you've got, which makes it sound quite negative in a way, but it wasn't, because we discovered just how good it is, and they did a very good job with that.
Yeah, exactly, and for every handful of people you have who are going, yeah, well, this will do for now, but it's not a replacement. It's not a replacement. You will have the few who go, oh, this is brilliant, and start looking into,
and then they get it more, and then they'll get interested in it and learn more and more about it.
Yeah,
so I think this will have done wonders for the sim racing community. I've no doubt.
I think you look at the price trends for a relatively affordable simulation style steering wheel for a computer or a PlayStation or whatever. The price jump when we go into lockdown, and how many people were starting to pick it up, I think you can't help but link that to the fact that the presence of sim racing was starting to be taken a bit more seriously thanks to lockdown.
It can't really be a coincidence, can it?
No, not to that scale. No, definitely not.
So yeah, certainly sim racing did really well out of it. And aside from sim racing, during that period where there wasn't any live motorsport on aside from the sim racing, I think, and this kind of brings us full circle, the sort of online content and the YouTube really helped. Certainly for me it did anyway, because I enjoy watching people like Josh Revel and that. And another way that Formula E was very good was they started doing live replays of the classic races, so you could
Of
watch.
course.
I remember you could watch. It was Degrassi and John-Eric Verne, I think, when they were battling back in season 4, and they had the live comments, so everyone could comment along and follow the race.
Yeah, of course.
Things like that were really good as well, with helping to get through that time.
Yeah, of course. I'd forgotten about that because I watched that race where was it Paris where it rained towards the end of the race and it all absolutely kicked off.
Yeah,
And I didn't watch it at
season
the time.
5, that wasn't it?
Yeah, and I hadn't
Which I think was
watched
the
it.
first ever proper wet Formula E race as
Yeah.
well.
But I hadn't watched that at the time, and I remember sitting down to watch that. And it was honestly, even though I kind of knew the result, I was still watching it like it was happening there and then.
That
And
was
Formula One again kind of did the same.
Robin Franz, I think, won that race, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
I can edit that part out if it's incorrect, because I must come across on this channel like I am the oracle of all Formula E
I mean,
knowledge that can't make mistakes.
even if you're not correct this time, I'm still impressed because God, I wouldn't remember that. But I mean, even Formula One did the same. They had their classic race replays, and
yeah, it's good that they were doing that. And Formula E have always been very good with that, because even when they weren't showing the live race replays, all the old Formula E races are all still up and available to watch on their YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Which is very helpful to me when I'm making videos talking about old topics and stuff, because I can always go back and sort of remind myself what happened in certain races. So I've been watching a lot of Jerome D'Ambrosio's races, his race wins in Formula E just recently.
Yeah,
and it's very helpful.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I know we sound like we're shouting out the likes of Josh Revel and Aidan Millwood and the likes of that for free. But say, for example, you're trying to do a research video about Cologne F1 and try and find some footage of them. Where are you going to find that? It's just the ether that is like pre-qualifying, and so again, like if I was trying to do something like that with World Rally and it was like a junior championship 15 years ago where the coverage wasn't there, it's so difficult to kind of find that information. Where Formula E have always been really on the pulse with their social media presence, their content production on sites like YouTube or whatever.
They really have, and that's another way I think the series has been very sort of forward thinking.
Yeah,
and I think Formula One, since the Liberty Media took it over, are gradually getting better with that, because certainly their online presence on YouTube has improved a lot. And during lockdown, they even started uploading some full-length broadcasts of old races from the 1990s and things, so credit to them for that. But yeah, Formula E have really been on that since the start, and I always try to publicise the Formula E channel, because if I'm talking about a race or something, I like to always say at the end, like, this race is available to watch on the Formula E channel, because for anyone who's getting interested in Formula E, they're useful to be able to sort of point them and show them, like, this is how good it is. That's a really exciting Formula E race. You can go and watch it. Like, this is how entertaining it is, sort of like as an example, like trying to get people into it.
That is a really good point, because you think, you say your friend, you're chatting to your friend and go, oh, do you know, I've never watched Formula E before. How did you get into it? Just go, look on the YouTube channel. You can watch some highlights, or you can watch one of the classic races in full.
Like if you want to know how crazy Formula E can be, go and watch like Paris season 5.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, certainly their online presence has been really useful, and it's only going to get better.
Yeah. So that's certainly been one of the things that has really helped, in my case, certainly, with getting through lockdown and finding fulfillment with being a motorsport fan. So is there anything else at all that you would like to add to that before we kind of wrap up?
No, I think we've covered a nice amount of topics. It's a very lockdown themed podcast, but of course, well, it's the
Well, that is
flavour
the
of
subject
month.
of the podcast, so
Yeah.
I think we've done well there. So yes, well, thank you for coming on,
Oh, thank you.
and to everyone watching, I'm very grateful to you as well. I hope you've enjoyed, and once again, don't forget to like and subscribe. More anecdotes and analysis from Formula E and motorsport.